Hello, everyone, and welcome to the full moon forecast for the full moon in Libra, which is coming up. I believe it's on the 6th. Let's just scroll up a second, if I can, on the 6th of April, 2023. And I've set this chart for the area of the world that I live. So don't worry too much about the house system. It's quite an intensive space. It's literally landing on the rising, on the ascendant and descendant where I live, but it probably won't be the same for you. So just think about where these planets are showing up rather than in the signs, rather than where in the houses they're showing up for you. So this is the Aries season, and we've already had an Aries new moon, and it takes 2 weeks from the moon to be side by side with the sun, which is where we find her at new moon, to move halfway around the 360-degree wheel to get to the opposition point, which is when we have full moon. And you can see that here. Here's the sun in Aries and the moon in Libra, 16 degrees Libra, 16 degrees of Aries. So that's where the sun, let's make that bigger, there we go. That's where the full moon is happening, at these 16-degree points. So if you have any planets or points around that space, or any of the cardinal signs, and I'm going to make that smaller again, sorry. So the cardinal would be Aries and Libra, obviously, those two are opposite each other, they're cardinal, and also Cancer and Capricorn, and you can see how that forms a square. If you look at where they are, it's making one big square around the chart, 90 degrees from Aries to Cancer, from 90 more degrees to Libra, and 90 to Capricorn, and 90 back to Aries. So those cardinal energies are going to be, and if you have things there, they're going to be feeling it super intensely for this full moon, because that's always what happens at full moon. We feel things intensely. And there's an interesting dynamic at play here. And I'm just going to jump into that before we look at actual Aries Libra conversation. Is Saturn, our one malefic or challenging planet, is at 3 degrees of Pisces, where we remember that Saturn just moved in March, so is still early in his exploration of Pisces this time around, bearing in mind that Saturn takes about 28 years, 29 years to cycle all the way back around the chart. So he hasn't been in Pisces for that length of time. Now he's in Pisces. He's just come out of spending the last sort of 6 years being super comfortable in his own spaces. And now he's got to get into this uncomfortable sort of watery Jupiterian space. I have a video on that if you want to dive in more deeply to Saturn, because that is a really important thing for us to understand in terms of how we're doing our work in the moment. And when I say in the moment, it's like a 2.5 to 3 year moment that he will be in the sign of Pisces. So I have elaborated on that in another video you can look at. But suffice to say, he's just getting used to having his feet wet. He's kind of trying to feel his way in, because this is an emotional sign. And at the same point, we have Mars at 5 degrees. So they're forming a really strong kind of trine to one another in also a water sign of Cancer. Now, Mars is the other malefic planet, the other big challenger. And Mars has also just undergone a much longer process than he normally would. So we can say Saturn's had his 3 years going through Aquarius, and he's just settling himself into the sign of the water sign of Pisces. And we can say Mars has just had almost 8-9 months in Gemini, because he had a retrograde that he doesn't have that frequently. And he's just moved into Cancer. So these two more challenging planets, the ones that come in and teach us some of our big lessons and put us under pressure in order to help us to grow. So we often, I think people often don't like them, but if we reframe it into they're doing this to help us to grow, then you realize that we need those planets as well. It can't always be sunshine and rainbows, or we don't grow. So these two planets are actually having a beautiful conversation with one another in water, both in water. So they're talking about, let's transform the way we feel. Let's work on our emotional health. Let's work on our emotional intelligence. And I cannot stress enough how this seems to be a huge part of the new world. I've been doing this kind of work for a really long time, and I am seeing an extreme acceleration in how people are learning to understand their traumas, their emotional triggers, and just become more emotionally intelligent. And this is happening hugely for men as well, in a much greater way than I have seen in my 20 odd years of working in this, where there is such a much more readiness and availability of men to also transform in this way. And you're just seeing children kind of coming up with this. It's more, just as children understand technology in a far better way than the grown-ups in their world, it's almost like it's inbuilt in them. So it seems is this emotional intelligence inbuilt in them. Of course, the traumas that you know happen to us, or how we experience things as children, is definitely, it doesn't matter if you're born as a child now or whichever generation you come from, that is going to be a thing that we have to learn to overcome, that we have to learn to grow through. But this particular full moon is very much in the axis of me. Aries self is me, and Libra self is us, or we. So the moon is in the sign saying we need to talk about this together. We need to communicate. We need to collaborate. We need to co-create. Libra wants to do things together. Now, the moon is our emotional self, and she's going, let's look at how we can compromise and consolidate and all of that. Whereas the Aries energy is more like, I am a pioneer, I am a warrior, I am strong on my own, I have this independence, I am competitive, kind of wants to be first, wants to be the winner, which of course, if we're talking about healthy conflict or healthy collaboration, it's not about winning and losing. So this is the perfect opportunity for us to really unpack where those two different dynamics lie in us. And of course, both of those lie in each of us. You may be more predisposed to the Libra traits or predisposed to the Aries traits, but they both exist within you. If you are more Aries, you will attract more Libra. And I'm not saying necessarily Aries, you are an Aries and you will attract a Libran. That happens, but that's not what I mean. If you have more Arian personality traits, you will attract somebody that is oftentimes more Libran, so that it balances you out. Or you attract the same until it's just too uncomfortable, and then you know you need to find the other, the opposite. So this is a really powerful dynamic, again, coming to this like emotional intelligence, because we are relational as human beings, and we need a tribe. We need a community. The Aquarian age is going to make that ever more present for us. Not that we didn't know it already, but now let's get intelligent about it. Let's get more intelligent about how to take that into the new earth, which I don't think anybody can deny at this point that we are completely moving into a new way of being. How do we intelligently connect? How do we intelligently relate, collaborate, co-create, and maintain our sense of self, our sense of individuality? That's very strong in this chart. I also see that we have Mars. We've just already mentioned him. He is sextile to the north node, which is over here, and he is trine to the south node, which is over here. So the nodes are about the moon. They are the points at which we have eclipses, and we're about this full moon actually initiates us into eclipse season. So after this full moon, 2 weeks later, we have our first eclipse. 2 weeks thereafter, we have our second eclipse. And then the following, new moon is going to say, okay, now we're done with eclipse season. Eclipses, the energy of eclipses go well beyond the season, but we're actually entering the seasonal portal of eclipses at this point. And at the point that we do that, we have Mars, the doing planet, in the moon's own sign, speaking to the moon's nodes, saying, yes, we need to be more, or we need to do more, nurturing our emotional intelligence, nurturing our needs. That's what we need to do, says Mars in Cancer. And the nodes are also at this really pivotal point of changing. So the nodes move backwards in the chart, and as the nodes currently at the point of this particular full moon are at 5 degrees, our first eclipse is actually going to be an Aries eclipse rather than a Taurus eclipse. And our second one will be and I won't speak into this a lot because we'll obviously get there when we get to those eclipses, but the second one will be a Taurus eclipse, a Scorpio eclipse. So the first eclipse is in the next axis, And the second eclipse is in the old axis. So this whole year, we have this transitioning space of the nodes. And this also adds a dynamic of duality, compromise, learning the different aspects of self, ultimately getting more intelligent, getting more emotionally savvy. This may be the word I can use. Then I want to point out a few things in the Aries section of this full moon. 15 degrees Chiron, the wound, 16 degrees the sun, 20 degrees Jupiter, who makes everything bigger that's going on around him. So if you have anything from 13, and actually I have my moon at 11 degrees of Aries, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be intense for me, but let's just call it from 13 to 22 of the cardinal signs, specifically Aries and Libra, but any of the cardinal signs, this is going to be really deeply internalized for you. You're going to have to work with this moon, or you don't have to. You don't have to. You have the opportunity to. I think that's the difference. That's what I feel about astrology. You have the opportunity to harness this energy. You don't have to do it, but it'll grow you for sure. And then again, if you come into the Taurus space here, you can see we have Mercury in Taurus, the North Node in Taurus, Uranus in Taurus, and Venus in Taurus. So we've got a lot of Taurian energy as well. And that is like the grit, the stick to it, the sometimes stuck, stuck in it. Sometimes it's stick to it, stick with it, stick through it, and sometimes it's stuck in it. What does that feel like for you? What part of that relates to you? How can you grow through that? How can you take the grit and the determination and the groundedness of Taurus to the positive? And where is it making you sedentary, stuck, sluggish, resistant to change? Because every aspect that we'll ever look at is going to have shadow and light traits. It's not about hiding the shadow. And I think that's something that's coming in more and more and more and more. And Pluto in Aquarius, remember Pluto is also just, we haven't spoken into him here. I've got a video on that too, but he's just moved into Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is going to be shedding a lot of light. He's going to be shedding a lot of light on these things. Bring in the shadow, integrate it with the light, recognize your strengths, own your weaknesses, get on board with that. And that can again take us to the whole Aries Libra dynamic. If Aries is competitive and wants to win at everything, look at where you are good at getting there first. Look at where you are good at being a pioneer, and own the fact that you're not good at everything, because nobody's good at everything. And if we could all just look at where our gifts are and take our gifts and work to that, and maybe just instead of being competitive against somebody else, because I want to win over that person, let that competitiveness be with yourself. I want to be the best version of me that I can be. And then look at the other side of that. Who can I collaborate with? Who can I cooperate with? Who can I co-create with in my private relationships, in my business, in all of these things to help me win at being me? I think that's maybe a good way for us to phrase this. So that's the story of the full moon, upcoming full moon. I'm going to stop the share and just say thank you so much for watching with me. I hope that these forecasts are helpful for you. I do have private options for you to take on if you want to delve a little deeper for yourself. So maybe you want to do a personalized astrology reading, a personalized card reading. Maybe you want to do a crystal healing session or a combination session. I work quite well with finding out like what's going on with you, and maybe I meet you where you're at and we work there. So yes, if you're interested in getting involved, I do have a link in the bio and I would love to work with you. So get in touch. But in the meantime, I really appreciate likes, shares, comments. If you enjoy this content, share it on, because I really want to be able to spread health and healing as far as possible. So thank you again for watching and have a beautiful, beautiful day.